My live rig here, right, is basically 2 monophonic synth voices, each one consisting of a triangle core oscillator, analog oscillator into the angle grinder, into the 100 grit. I've got this one set up as a bass line. This one is a lead line. And then I have a mutant bass drum for a kick, and I'm using the Interstellar Radio as a hi-hat / snare percussion.
So maybe start with maybe the bass.
So if we bring out the angle grinder, it's still a little bit filthy with the 100 grit on it, but I've got the distortion dialed down a little bit. But we bring up the angle grinder. You can get some almost like dubstep wubs with it. But I tend to keep it really low, just the triangle into an input, out. In this case, the out is actually going into a VCA, and then the VCA is going into the 100 grit. That allows me to do this thing with the 100 grit where I bring up some feedback, and as the
you can hear the signal dies down and it lets that feedback through. You get that kind of dual feedback distortion thing going on.
So as the angle grinder dies out because of the envelope I've got on the VCA, have this feedback that to me sounds kind of like leaning into a fat amplifier and letting your guitar ring out.
So it looks like maths is the simple clock, one of the looping envelopes.
Yep. And I also have maths, the same envelope that's driving the clock. I'm also sending to the gain on the 100 grit, so we get this sort of like 16th note bassline effect from it, which pleasing to me.
So again, you've got this like dual layered rhythm between the VCA that feeds the 100 grits audio input and then the kind of choppy 16th note of the gain itself.
I think to get a really interesting bass sound, having the having a VCA both before the filter and after the filter is the way to go. Or in this case, the VCA before the filter and then the internal 100 grit VCA, which is after.
So that's voice 1.
Yeah, that's voice 1. That's this, and then I just brought in the Interstellar Radio as a snare drum.
Can we hear that without the bass going?
Sure.
So working this way through your sets, are you trying to change the noise tone as you go on?
I do. I also I change depending on the track whether the Interstellar Radio is acting as a snare or a hi-hat. In this case, it's acting as a snare of sorts. But if I fill it in on each step, now we've got a pretty serviceable hi-hat. And if I open up the if we open up the envelope, then we just have insane noise drones, which I also do during the set. I found I actually don't need anything other than the kick drum and the Interstellar Radio as far as percussion, because depending on the song, I can and just change the envelope to get different types of metallic percussion out of the Interstellar Radio.
And of course, in modulation, you can move between each one on different steps anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And I also have this thing happening right now with the Interstellar Radio where I have the error out running into the signal input. just means that everything you do with it is nasty self-pass feedback. That's always changing like a little bit. Like if I undid that, then it's more static this way. But with the feedback patch in, it's always kind of changing.
Definitely much grittier. It lost its not clean, but it's kind of ring modded pitch that it seemed to have without.
Exactly. So another thing I'm doing sometimes with Voice 1, which I forgot to bring up, but I have the mutant kick drum running into input 2 on the 100 grit. So that can get, by mixing that with the bass, you can get these really these interference tones, or not tones exactly, but and you can just add a little bit more oomph to the kick of the song.
There's such a range to the modules, you can see why you don't really need much else.
That's my hope. The Voice 2, what I have going right now, is basically the same thing. So with the angle grinder down, that's just the clean triangle wave into the 100 grit with in times 100 mode.
So always going for cleaner waves that you want to distort as opposed to actually filtering rich waves, right?
That's the way I tend to do it. It's a lot. Yeah, just the triangle wave to begin with just gives me a lot to work with. And then I can bring the angle grinder into higher kind of ring mod type tones. Dial back.
Do you find yourself playing the touch points on 100 grit much live?
I do. There tends to be a point during the set where I just do, usually on the bass voice, just going into a noise solo on it, or just to
I love the idea of a noise solo. The lead noise player.
It's so at my last set I actually tried doing something that was new for me. I'd seen both Daedalus and Mark Hostler talk about making your rig visible to the audience.
Yeah.
So I took this and I just pushed it over. So it was upside down, but like the audience could really see it. It wasn't totally upside down because I was still looking down at the rig.
I remember seeing Daedalus with a mono always angled towards the audience rather than himself.
Yeah, I basically just did that. And people could see what I was doing. And then when I went in for the touch points, I felt like people could really...
They can relate.
Yeah. I grab them pretty frequently. I don't always use the 100 grit with the touch points because I think it's a pretty good VCF, VCA distortion. Like it does all these things.
Yeah, and it's a part in the set. It's not necessarily the thing you've got to do with it all the time.
No, but it is fun. And sometimes I'll pull out all the inputs and just go for a total, like finish the set by...
Rather than cranking the decay on a reverb, you go for this crank distortion instead.
Yeah, totally.
Similar effect, big wash of noise.
Yeah. And then I just flip the power switch once I hit peak noise, usually, which anyone who's seen me play has...
The drop the mic move.
Yeah. It's never not satisfying. Always satisfying. Another thing in this rig, this is not my module, but the angle grinder can throw out peak to peak depending on the setting you're in. So some VCAs handle that fine and others don't. I'm finding that I like the Coma dual discrete VCA. Seems totally happy with whatever horrible mess I throw at it.
And just some other kind of mechanics of the system. DLD for delay, coming off a send from your mixer, the external Mackie mixer there. Sequenced on the monome, right?
Yep. The monome takes forever to learn because there's no labeling, but I've found it pretty good. I'm also using, it's a weird thing to use as an output module, but this DPW limit just, it's
great.
Yeah.
Really good.
And that helps the mutant bass drum out a lot, I think.
That's the end of the video.